On the 14th of July 1789, angry crowds roamed the streets of Paris. The focus of their anger was the Bastille, the most feared of the king's prisons. On this day, two ordinary men would be swept up in the maelstrom. One was a nobleman and minor bureaucrat in the service of the king. The other, a common watchmaker. On this day, both would help decide the fate of the nation without even knowing it. Only one would live to tell the tale. The governor of the Bastille was Bernard de Launay, who had lived all his life in the prison. Born in the Bastille, he inherited the post from his father. De Launay was unremarkable in every way, except one. He had an extraordinary inability to make up his mind. JeanBaptiste Humber lived in Paris. Working for the king's jewelers, he managed to keep food in the cupboard and a roof over his head. But privately, he blamed the royal government for problems in France. In the summer of 1789, anarchy swept through the city of Paris. Overtaxed and underfed, a crowd swarmed through the streets in search of bread. The food riots turned to general riots, and on July the 12th, looting broke out all over the city. The tiny police force was overwhelmed. Some citizens of Paris formed a militia to control the rioting. They took to the streets armed with pikes and swords. JeanBaptiste Humber was quick to join up. Abandoning his trade, he prepared to risk his life on the dangerous streets of Paris. At the end of the 1780s, France's government was proposing to reduce the king's power. The starving people of Paris, believing that the government would at last put food in their mouths, supported this challenge to royal authority. King Louis XVI had ruled France for 14 years. His queen, Marie Antoinette, enjoyed a luxurious lifestyle which she took for granted. They were at the center of an extravagant court at Versailles, 18 miles from Paris. They danced and dined on venison, while the poor were starving. Parliament and people watched anxiously to see how the king would react. Louis played a waiting game. He stayed at Versailles with his court and summoned more troops to Paris. Facing rebellion in Parliament and in the streets, Louis's resolve hardened. No one would dictate conditions to the king. If he could not establish power through royal command, he would use force. But on July the 14th, the king's troops were far from Paris. That morning, JeanBaptiste Humber was still on duty. After patrolling all night, he was exhausted. There was a sense that the old order was losing control, and no one knew what would replace it. It was a Tuesday, but few Parisians would go to work that day, including Humber. After 24 hours on duty, Humber was making his way home. All over Paris, citizens were gathering to discuss their next move. Wild rumors raced through the streets. Royal troops were on the march to disband the militia and restore the king's rule.
Qu'est-ce qui se passe? Vous savez pas, la patrouille, tu parles, la délégation.
The citizens of Paris had tasted power for only 2 days, and they were not ready to give it up. 2 words none had dared to speak before now echoed through the city. To arms! To arms! An immense crowd, 80,000 strong, set off for an arsenal where they could get arms, Les Invalides. Les Invalides was a large military hospital located on the left bank of the River Seine. It was built to house injured or retired French veterans. Stored in the basement were 32,000 muskets, enough to equip an army. The crowd roared, "Arms, arms, give us arms." The governor of Les Invalides refused to give in to their demands. He insisted, "I cannot give you weapons without permission from the king." As a precaution, he ordered 20 veterans to put the muskets out of action by unscrewing the firing hammers. But the pensioners had switched sides. It took over 6 hours to disable about 20 muskets. The governor of Les Invalides was heavily outnumbered. He could only stand and watch as the 80,000-strong crowd forced its way into the cellars to seize the muskets. But they could find neither powder nor shot for their weapons. The crowd set off in search of ammunition. There was only one place in Paris where they could find powder by the barrelful: the Bastille.
Que fais-tu là? Je suis déserteur de l'armée. Mais ton régiment, il est où, ton régiment?
On the way, Humber met deserters who confirmed that the king's army was marching on Paris.
Marcher à Paris? Oui. Ils vont attaquer Paris? Oui.
Leaving Les Invalides behind, the crowd crossed the River Seine and made their way to the Bastille. The Bastille had 8 towers linked by walls 5 feet thick. Many believed it to be a place of torture, where prisoners sent by the king disappeared without trace. In fact, on July the 14th, only 7 prisoners were lodged in the Bastille. 4 were forgers, and another was Julius Caesar. Or so he thought. When Governor Delaunay heard news of the raid on Les Invalides, he immediately set to work. He posted guards to watch for the rebellious citizens of Paris. On his way to the Bastille, the watchmaker was so desperate to find ammunition for his musket, he resorted to buying nails. Meanwhile, Governor Delaunay was improving his defenses. He ordered his troops to bring out the gunpowder and move the cannons into firing position. Delaunay remained confident. Musket against cannon. The odds were against the watchmaker and his comrades. Few of them had ever used a musket. Few had even heard a shot fired in anger. But then neither had Delaunay. Humber and the crowd turned into the Rue Saint-Antoine. The daunting sight of the Bastille loomed before them. Delaunay knew there was only one way into the Bastille. As the crowd approached, he gave orders for the drawbridge to be raised.